British Columbia has announced new rules around short-term rentals. As of May 1st, in communities with more than 10,000 people, short-term rentals will only be allowed in principal residences. Earlier, I spoke to BC's housing minister about the impact this will have on the housing market in BC and what he makes of Ottawa's plans. Minister Kahlon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before talking about the federal government's housing plan, I want to talk about some of the things you're doing in your province, starting with new short-term rental rules that will go into effect at the beginning of May that will limit short-term rentals to an owner's primary residence, plus I think an additional unit in communities with more than 10,000 residents. Tell me why you've targeted that specific area and what impact you think it'll have on your housing market.
Well, we are struggling like most communities across the country. In fact, North America, we've got people struggling to find places to rent, to buy. And we've also seen a real pressure when it comes to short-term rentals. We believe, we've seen research that shows 19,000 full homes were bought by investors for short-term rental. So as we're trying to increase housing supply, we're also losing it to short-term rentals, and we believe we need to find a balance, and that's what we've done. We've continued to have short-term rentals available, but what we're saying is investors that are buying complete homes only to run them like hotels, well, that's something we don't want to see anymore. Tourism-dependent communities can still have that option because we know it's an important part of their local economy, but overall across the province, we want to see that housing back for people in our communities.
So just so I understand, if you live in the property or have something attached to your property, you can still go ahead and rent it. It's if you're not living there. If it's vacant, is that how it works?
Correct. If you've got a basement suite and you're wanting to use it for short-term rental, or if you leave on a holiday and you're thinking, oh, I'll just rent it out. We know for major tournaments and events, people leave town, they want to be able to do it. You're still allowed to do that. But what we don't want to see, what we're moving away from is people, investors, quite frankly, buying complete homes, displacing people in communities and then running them like hotels. That is something we're moving away from.
So obviously you mentioned tourism there. Airbnb said that this will put billions of dollars in tourism spending and all the spin-offs from that at risk. How do you make sure that that won't happen?
Well, Airbnb is making millions of dollars in BC through tourism, and that's fine. They're a business. That's what they have to do. Their objective is different than ours. Our objective is to ensure that people in our communities have access to our housing stock. We are allowing short-term rentals still to be there. They're allowed. But communities like Vancouver, for example, have had a primary residence requirement for years. Yeah. But the problem is they haven't been able to enforce it. The platforms haven't been cooperative to ensure that's being done. And so now we're backstopping, quite frankly, the mayors have asked us to do this. We are backstopping them, $10,000 a day fines for platforms that don't do their part. We think it's important and an important step to address housing overall.
How will that work, though? How will you, is someone going to go around and check online and then go and make sure someone's there? Like, how will you actually enforce it? Yeah.
Well, we've actually just created a digital platform to work between local governments and the platforms. VRBO, Booking.com, they've already aligned their software with ours. So local governments now would be able to upload properties that they believe are breaking the rules. The platforms have within 5 days to take them off or face fines. Also, the platforms are required every month to give us a complete list of every single listing in the province that they have. So we can now link that with the Ministry of Finance, who has data on who has a primary residence, what investment properties they have. And then by the end of the year, we'll be launching a provincial-wide registry. So we'll have every single listing getting a provincial number that has to be displayed on the website. So we believe we have a comprehensive program. So far, we've seen cooperation from the platform, certainly those two, and we expect the others to be in place by May 1st.
So you said 19,000 homes are available for short-term rent. Does that mean you will now expect to see more homes on the market? Like, how many of those will actually translate now into available places to live for people in BC?
Well, we're already seeing it. Since we passed the legislation, we have so many cases of people now having access to homes that were short-term rentals. Many of them, in fact, I just met with a woman the other day who has now a home for her family and is running a childcare daycare operation out of the home. So we're already seeing the impact. But, you know, some cases, people are putting them on the long-term market. In some cases, they're selling their units because they don't want to be in that type of business, which is fine because it still creates an opportunity for someone else to be able to buy their first home or a home for their family.
I want to ask you, obviously, about the federal budget and the housing strategy that the federal government announced. Some ideas that they borrowed from you, I would suggest. But they announced $6 billion for housing in a new infrastructure fund that provinces can access if you meet certain conditions, more duplexes, triplexes, that kind of thing. There are some provinces that take issue with that. And so the federal government has said, we'll just go directly to cities. Do you see any problems with the federal government getting directly involved in housing and dictating the kind of things that they want to see from you?
Well, I certainly have been critical of the federal government in the past when it comes to housing, but we are pleased with what we've seen in the budget in particular. And, in British Columbia, all the elements that the federal government wants to encourage provinces to do, we're already doing it. And so my message to the federal government is, if the other provinces don't want to do it, send us the money. We are in need of the infrastructure. We will use those dollars. In fact, all of the communities in our province are allowing 3 to 4 units because we passed in legislation. All of them are required to have transit-oriented development. And so we're doing all those elements. And if other premiers believe that's not the path they want to take, so be it. We're ready. We have had critiques of the federal government giving dollars directly to municipalities, but that was more for projects, housing projects. We had projects that the federal government provided supports directly to local governments, and then they had cost pressures. And then they came to us at the province to say, can you help bail us out? That was our concern. But as far as this infrastructure fund goes, we're giving it 2 thumbs up. We're ready to go.
Like you've done a lot on housing in your province because you also obviously facing real challenges like the rest of the country, but not all provinces are moving as quickly as you are. Was there anything in the federal budget or the housing plan was there anything that wasn't there that you would have liked to see or that from your experience would make a really big difference?
Well, our housing plans are tied to the Ontario Housing Task Force and the BC Housing Task Force. And so the challenges we're facing are similar. Yeah. As far as the budget goes, I would say that we desperately need the federal government to move quicker when it comes to funding housing on and off reserve for Indigenous communities. Quite frankly, I think it's too slow. They need to do it quicker. We're funding more on reserve housing as a province. We're the only province funding it. In this way, we're funding more projects than the federal government is, and that we believe is shameful. And so they do need to do more on that. But on the other elements, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to the changes that they made around GST for purpose-built rentals, the capital cost allowance, all of those things are pretty positive.
The public lands aspect, the using federal lands to lease to developers, does that seem can you think of places in BC where that could happen? Does that seem a practical thing to do?
Well, we need the federal government to do that. We have been building housing for a long time for people, that are in shelters, for low income, but we need to really focus on middle income earners. There's people that are struggling across the country, and using government lands to be able to do that is great. We already have a partnership with BC Builds and now I guess Canada Builds. Yeah. But we need those lands available. And for example, in Esquimalt in Victoria, we have people that are serving our country working on the base there, and they're struggling to find housing in the community, and the land is sitting there vacant. We are hoping that type of land gets prioritized as the federal government looks at available land that they're going to be putting up for housing.
Minister, thank you for making the time. Come back anytime. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks, Rosemary. Thank you.